United in the name of bipartisanship, congressional negotiators Paul Ryan and Patty Murray announced a budget deal that they say will help the government avoid another shutdown in the months to come.
This bill reduces the deficit by $23 billion, and it does not raise taxes, and it cuts spending in a smarter way. From the outset, we knew that if we forced each other to compromise a core principle, we would get nowhere. That is why we decided to focus on where the common ground is. So that's what we've done. That means to me a budget agreement that reduces the deficit without raising taxes and replaces some of the arbitrary across-the-board spending cuts with smarter, permanent reforms that pay for this relief.
For far too long here in Washington, D.C., compromise has been considered a dirty word, especially when it comes to the federal budget. So I am very proud to stand here today with Chairman Ryan to announce we have broken through the partisanship and the gridlock and reached a bipartisan budget compromise that will prevent a government shutdown in January. Our deal puts jobs and economic growth first by rolling back sequestration's harmful cuts to education and medical research and infrastructure investments and defense jobs for the next 2 years. Now, I know there were some people who thought these cuts should continue, but I'm glad that we increased these key domestic investments and that we averted the next round of scheduled cuts to military programs, bases, and defense jobs in our country. This deal builds on the $2.5 trillion in deficit reduction we have done since 2011 and continues the precedent that we set in the fiscal cliff deal that sequestration shouldn't be replaced with spending cuts alone. This bipartisan deal will help millions of Americans who are wondering if they were going to keep paying the price.
Now, the deal, which sets the 2014 federal budget at $1.012 trillion, has been hailed a bipartisan breakthrough, and it's expected to come to a vote in Congress by the end of this week. President Obama responded to the deal by saying, quote, "This agreement doesn't include everything I'd like, and I know many Republicans feel the same way. That's the nature of compromise. But it's a good sign the Democrats and Republicans in Congress were able to come together and break the cycle of short-sighted, crisis-driven decision-making to get this done." So, Zach, the plan seems like it has the backing of top Republicans, the president himself. Do you think that Ryan and Murray are going to have a hard time passing it?
I actually do think they're going to have a hard time passing it, and I also think if they do get it passed, it doesn't mean anything. I think this is basically a fake deal, and claiming that they've got some sort of 2-year agreement on spending is totally ridiculous when Paul Ryan said very openly at the press conference yesterday that this does not address the debt ceiling. If you do not raise the debt ceiling as part of this deal, congressional Republicans will come back sometime between March and June and say, hey, we want a whole bunch of different stuff, and if you don't give us our stuff, we're going to blow up the global economy. That didn't used to be the way that business was done in Washington, but it is now, and so any deal that doesn't include a raising of the debt ceiling is just totally nonsense. It won't matter come March, and none of the stuff that they got through here, the good and the bad, is going to matter.
And so, well, in that case, why do they even bother calling it a deal, right? I mean, why not be a little bit more straightforward with the public?
I mean, I guess baby steps, right? I mean, this is better than threatening to shut down the government right now, right? I mean, if you just come out and say, okay, come June, we're going to shut down the government no matter what we do now, screw everything. I mean, that's a kind of nihilistic way to go about making public policy. So they chair the budget committees. You know, it is their job to put together a budget. But remember, the budget process is just the first step in a series of steps that lead to actually funding the government. Once you lay out the budget blueprint, the details have to be filled in by the Appropriations Committee, and so far in the House hasn't been able to get their own appropriations bills through the House at a very good clip. I mean, the GOP, which runs the show in the House, hasn't been able to get enough of its own GOP members behind its own legislation. So even if this deal manages to get through, and even if we pretend the debt ceiling thing is not a problem, it's not at all obvious that Republicans are even going to be able to go to follow through on Paul Ryan's lead here and meet Democrats, sort of halfway on some stuff.